This is the poem about actually my first memory of life. It's called Totem. I remember it was spring, a foggy day full of different shades of greens. I hadn't realized yet that I was alive. I've always been a slow thinker. I remember walking with Mom and her sister across a field or meadow. Our way came to a turtle. I didn't know what it was. Listened to the women, felt the trill of the word. The shell looked like a rock. Animal without a head or any legs. I peeked in a hole and met two shiny eyes scowling out at me. My first meeting of a painted turtle. I don't think he'd ever met a 3-year-old boy before either. This is a poem about one of my favorite spots in Osceola County when I was growing up. It's called Winding Like Sirens. You could hear the trains, scary whistles, winding like sirens through the woods, warning the little city miles away. The steel thunder gathering closer and closer, rattling through old Indian burial mounds, lost in the woods Grandpa told me about but I never found. I'd drop whatever I was doing and run down the gravel road fast I could past Peggy Jackson's, the crazy woman. She'd shoot us kids if we strayed in the corn. By the time we reached the railroad, the whole ground was starting to shiver from the diesel pulse serpenting through. My heartbeats were scared birds perched upon old skeleton buildings so my eyes could see level with the trains as they came roaring round the hill right at me before swiveling past on blurry caterpillar wheels that could crush a penny flat, 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 or me. Once I stood in the tracks and flirted that idea, then jumped free. Standing there, counting the rollicking boxcars, I saw a hobo ride by. See, a hobo when I was a kid was big stuff. They were like mythical characters to me. Which brings me to another poem by Talon Thomas, a good friend of mine. A poem written on the old Pierre Marquette Railroad. I do believe in the 1950s. Hobo. Daddy met a hobo walking along the railroad tracks. Hobo told him a secret. I saw it. I was climbing that tree 10 yards away. I saw that hobo tell my dad a secret, and I watched him dance a jig, and I watched him walk away. That old hobo's legs were limber as a little girl's legs, and his eyes sparkled and rolled. Tell me, Daddy, Daddy, what the hobo told? Hobo said, I have thrown caution to the wind so many times the wind is almost full of caution. Slice my lemons, a blade of slow silver, leave my lemons alone. Every single thing I ever done or been, I only done or been only by accident. I've been a rum bum, a beach bum, a word of bum, a bumma, to boot, to boot, to boot, to boot. Some folks say, old hobo, he just don't give a hoot. They wrong. Hoot, hoot. Old hobo give a hoot to anybody who asks for one. Ode to Ernie Harwell, a poem I wrote for my grandpa Helmbold and Ernie, and I have 2 thank you letters from this poem from Ernie Harwell on the Detroit Tiger stationery. They're my prized possessions. My wife had them mounted for me this past spring. Over 5,000 Detroit Tiger ball games ago, Grandpa took me trout fishing the old Butterfield Creek. On the way home, half asleep, I listened to Ernie Harwell recite the late innings of a Tiger ball game. Old Grandpa's cigarette glowed like a campfire in the dark. Outside the car windows, Michigan floated along. I felt content as a young trout snuggled under a log in the current. Since that night, only thing on the radio that's rivaled rock and roll or country and western music is Ernie Harwell going on and on like an epic poem full of Ty Cobb trivia and Detroit Tiger history, like a human baseball encyclopedia. Always sounded the same, but always differed through 3 decades and mostly the incarnations of my life. I even proposed to my wife with Ernie crooning in the background. Or was it the Rolling Stones song, Time Waits for No One? That was over 2,000 Tiger games ago. Grandpa's been gone since 1979. Late that last September, he whispered, Psst, I've got a secret. I'm dying. Then he sat there like an old house beside the road and watched life go by like a Denny McClain fastball. There isn't any real security, but only Harwell and Airways came close. Elegy for the Carl D. Bradley. 640 feet of riveted steel, judged unsinkable. The big freighter Carl D. Bradley steered northeast away from the shelter from Wisconsin's shore, working through hurricane-force winds, twisting and thumping a wild arc across northern Lake Michigan, headed home to Rogers City after the last haul of the year. Ugly green 30-foot-high waves thundered against the starboard hull. November 18th, 1958, the gray light disappeared in the howling black snow clouds. The 30-year-old longboat could carry enough crushed stone to fill 3 freight trains 100 cars long, but she'd rubbed bottom near Cedarville 2 weeks before. The cargo holds were full of rust, and she'd been popping rivets all day from the strain of the storm, but this was normal. The 35-man crew were down below out of the screaming winds. At 5:30, the big ship radioed Rogers City, telling the wives not to worry, that the waves were rough but routine. Minutes later, Carl D. Bradley was lifted out of the lake by a dark mountain of water full of unbelievable power. The old inland seas freighter groaned, bowed in the middle. Radio for help buckled and broke into eternity. Electric cables snapped and hissed. Men screamed and prayed for their wives and kids and friends. The hot boiler exploded at a death shudder as the cold lake swallowed the ship's heart and through the icy night hours, all but 2 of the men. Cars full of families from Rogers City, Posen, Onaway, St. Ignace, and Sheboygan drove to Charlevoix. They shined their headlights like prayers out into the storm, but morning rolled in full of fatherless children. 14 years later, a faded life ring from the Carl D. Bradley washed ashore on Paley Island in western Lake Erie. Springwell's Mound. Just north of where the River Rouge pours into the Detroit River in the summer of 1763, the ruins of Springwell's Mound was a mysterious, old, almost sacred man-made place. What was left of this Stone Age Renaissance Center was over 4 stories high, 500 feet across, and rivaled the great earthworks of prehistoric North America. The Ottawas, Potawatomis, and Wyandots sometimes buried their dead on top. Way down under, skeletons entombed for 1,000 years lay decorated in copper hair pipes, amulets, stone jewelry, and shell beads, the grinning skulls like cornerstones in the old earth full of secrets. Chief Pontiac used the place as a watchtower between the lakes during his siege of Fort Detroit. Springwell's Mound disappeared piecemeal for city streets and miscellaneous landfills. Today, nobody knows where it stood. The bones have blended into the earth and scattered under the rumbling steel, cement, and asphalt of Detroit City. Coyote's Back. Here's a poem I got the idea to write this poem at the veterinarian's office in Elk Rapids, Michigan. You never know when that idea is going to come to you in a poem, and I'm always listening to other people for that first line. Which we were stitching my dog up and talking about how coyotes get a lot of bad raps, and she was talking about how they don't eat that many fawns, they don't eat that many young turkeys, but they do eat, they're rough on poodles. And I said, well, I can understand how a coyote would whip a poodle, but this is a 90-pound watchdog. And then the vet goes, well, you know, coyotes are pretty tough cookies. And the poem came later that afternoon. Coyote's back, and you guys are going to be sorry. Hey la, Coyote's back. He's kind of big for his size. He's awful strong and scrawny. Hey la, Coyote's back. Every time a rabbit disappears or a fawn comes up missing, you blame Coyote. Ow! Ow! You guys been saying things about him that really aren't true. Ow! So look out now, because coyotes are pretty tough cookies. You better watch out for your poodles. Hey la, Coyote's back.